Welcome back. You're tuned to Ivanhoe Grammar School Presents. And recently, my co-host, Matthew, and I contacted the leaders of both major political parties in Australia to request an interview. And I'm delighted to say that Mr. Bill Shorten, the leader of the Australian Labor Party, accepted our invitation and is now on the line. Good afternoon, Mr. Shorten, and thanks for joining us.
Well, good on you guys to have the initiative to want to talk about politics and the future of this country, so I'm happy to spend a few minutes.
It's Matthew here, Mr. Shorten. Your bio tells us that you have been actively involved with the Labour Party since being a student studying law at Monash University in the early 1990s. Can you tell us what the light bulb moment was that made you want to enter politics in 2005?
Well, I first joined the Labour Party when I was 17 in 1985. There wasn't one particular moment which made me want to be in politics. It was a contribution of perhaps four factors. My education opened my eyes to the need to make sure that everyone gets a fair go. My family had always been interested in politics, and they'd been members of the unions, but they were always teaching me to question things and to not just accept the view that because someone was really rich, that they automatically were better than anyone else. So to respect people, not their wealth. Then, of course, there was my time working, both as a lawyer and as a union rep. And then there's also my general interest in history. Australia is a very special country. And one of the reasons we're a very special country is we've always had the fair go all round. So it didn't matter what postcode you lived in or what god you worshipped or your gender. This is a country where what really matters is how hard you work and your merit, nothing else.
Prior to becoming a politician, you were heavily involved with the union movement, ultimately becoming the National Secretary for the Australian Workers' Union. What was your most memorable moment, either as a National Secretary or at any other time whilst at the AWU?
Well, I had lots of really great moments helping people. Probably the most memorable moment was when the two trapped Beaconsfield miners came out and were rescued, found alive, and then 9 days later were rescued from 1,000 metres under the ground. That was just an amazing time. But when we were able to help win better deals for workers, that was always a great feeling, be they factory workers or construction workers or oil rig workers or shearers or jockeys or whole lots of people. When I've been able to help people get a better deal, every one of those is great. And what I really love now, even a decade after I stopped working in the union, is when a former member of mine, a union member, comes up to me and says, "You remember when we got a better deal? You know, in particular negotiations." That always makes me feel good that ordinary people appreciate the work that we did in the union.
When you were our age, 17 and 18, who did you look up to?
My mum. She was the smartest person I ever met.
A great answer, and one that I fully agree with. Now, while speaking of influential people, who do you believe to be Australia's best and or greatest Prime Minister, and why?
We've had great Prime Ministers, Hawke and Keating, Ben Chifley, but when you look at John Curtin, who was Labor Prime Minister in the darkest hours of World War II, he did so much to keep Australia safe. He was such a brilliant man who'd weathered his own demons. He'd spent times in his life when he was hugely unpopular. But when Australia needed a great leader, John Curtin stepped up. So Prime Minister John Curtin.
As the leader of the Australian Labor Party, what qualities do you think a person needs to possess to be a good leader?
Well, there's plenty of qualities I think people need, but here's one. You should listen twice as much as you talk. You've got two ears and one mouth, and that's probably the proportion in which you should listen to talk. People are smart. If you just give them the time to listen to them, most people have got good ideas for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for Australia. The trick is just to listen to people and treat people with respect. My job as leader of the Labor Party is not to be the smartest person in the room. It's to get the smartest people into the room. It's to get the innate wisdom and capacity of everyday Australians and just facilitate it.
Being a politician, you're always in the spotlight, and it doesn't matter which side of politics a person is on, one will always have their critics. Some say one needs to have a thick skin. Do you find that this is the case?
Oh yes, leading the opposition in the national parliament is not for the faint-hearted. But what you've always got to remember is that a lot of the grief you cop isn't because of you as a person, it's because of the position you hold. A lot of the things which I don't like, which get written about me or said about me, frankly, if I wasn't leader of the opposition, wouldn't get written or said about me. So you cannot afford to take it personally. Of course, when your kids get teased in the playground because of something that's been written in the newspaper that the parents of some other kids say, and then the kids repeat it, that's really unpleasant. But as a general rule, you can't take it personally. You just can't. You just got to back yourself and realise that a lot of the grief which gets written is just people attacking, if you like, the job you do rather than you as a human being.
Being a politician can be most rewarding and I believe also very frustrating. What do you find frustrating about your job?
Not being the Prime Minister. I mean, there's decisions which are made which if you'd been sitting in the other guy's job, you could have avoided. The car industry's closing in October. October the 15th through to the 20th, thousands of car workers are going to lose their jobs. The last Australian-made cars from Wodago are going to roll off the assembly line. I find it greatly frustrating this government didn't give us stuff. I find it frustrating that we're going to have a postal survey on marriage equality when the Parliament should have just simply voted on it. I find it frustrating that we can't settle policies on climate change. I find it frustrating that the government's still making cuts to Medicare. You know, I get that we didn't win the election, but when I see this government making some of the cruel and unnecessary decisions and incompetent decisions, you just go, goodness me, this next election can't come around quick enough.
Australia plays an important role in our region of the world in the fields of humanitarian aid and security. Are you happy with our role in regional and world politics, or could it be improved?
I think we do a good job. Our defence forces in the Middle East are outstanding. I think Australian diplomats do a good job. I think some of our foreign aid programs are really making a difference in terms of tackling poverty in our region. I think there's more we could do. I think we need to do more to help refugees in the countries around Iraq and Syria. I think there's more we could do to advance the case of climate change. But Australia does pretty well, I have to say. I think Australia, for a middle power, is quite influential.
Finally, what advice would you give to any young person wishing to become a politician?
Work hard. There's a famous saying when said to some famous golfer, gee, you're so lucky. And this golfer said, words to the effect, the harder I practice, the luckier I get.
Well, thank you once again for your time, Mr. Shorten. There certainly is plenty to take away from your comments today.
No, good on you fellas for having the initiative to get in touch. I appreciate that very much. Good questions.
That was Mr. Bill Shorten, leader of the Federal Opposition and Australian Labor Party, joining us today on Ivanhoe Grammar School Presents. In the coming weeks, we will again make a request to the Prime Minister's office, and maybe we might be able to feature the PM in the near future.